VIEWSONIC finally made an ultrawide. Get amazing prices on the brands you love at Micro Center. Micro Center has over 30,000 items in stock, including desktops, laptops, computer components, monitors, TVs, and more. Not sure which parts to choose for your next build? Then use Micro Center's custom PC builder to find compatible parts, create your parts list, add them to your cart, and use same-day pickup at one of Micro Center's 25 locations nationwide. And if you're not comfortable building it, one of Micro Center's professional builders can build it for you as fast as same day for a fee. And if you need ideas for a build, then head to Micro Center's Build Showcase for great build inspiration, or submit your build for others to see. To see everything that Micro Center has to offer, click the link in the description below. I've been kind of saying for a while now, we've looked at elite monitors from VIEWSONIC for years now. And I've always said, like, they need an ultra-wide. I'm an ultra-wide snob. Every panel I've ever used at home, ever since getting my very first ultra-wide, has been ultra-wide. I just, that extra real estate on the side, it's like the perfect balance between a multi-panel setup, which can be a little bit cumbersome depending on multiple bases or if you have multiple arms or whatever. It's extra load on your graphics card, believe it or not. Having two cables plugged in, your graphics card will idle higher, the temperatures will be up a little bit, your fans will be a little louder. So this gives you extra screen real estate for whether it just be content consumption while working, maybe gaming in a window while having live stream panels up on the sides and not have to have multiple panels. With, you know, and in terms of cost, it's fairly effective. This is a 3440 by 1440, which is pretty standard, WQHD. So QHD is the 1440p, W stands for wide QHD. But VIEWSONIC just never really made one. I mean, they did, but it wasn't a gaming panel. It was more of like a Photoshop type of panel where it's a 60 hertz IPS, very high color accuracy, designed for content creators, editors, Photoshop, that sort of stuff, but not really a gaming panel. Then the mini LED panel launched. Mini LED now is kind of the way to get the contrast, or at least as close of a contrast as you possibly could to OLED, while still having a backlight. Now remember, LED panels are sending light through an array, and then the pixel gates are opening and closing to allow those pixels to change color, which gives you your image. But how do you have a black image when you're shining light through something? With the mini LEDs, you can actually turn the LEDs off. Now, not necessarily individually, which is what OLEDs are able to do. This gives you a 1152 local dimming zone, which means that they can dim the whole backlight area around those pixels to make the contrast ratio a lot better. Local dimming is gonna have some drawbacks, like for instance, haloing. So if you had like a white text on a black screen, you might see a glow around that text. Mini LED panels also alleviate some of the drawbacks of any sort of foil backlit or reflective backlight for edge lighting LED panels, so you're not gonna have horns in the side, in the corners of your screen. So now that we have mini LED, which kind of bridges the gap between the very expensive OLEDs and better than the edge lighting LED/LCD type backlighting that I just talked about, you get now this. The first mini LED ultra wide that I'm personally taking a look at from VIEWSONIC. I've been a huge fan of the Elite series. In fact, on my desk, ever since we've done this remodel, this is the first time I actually did not put an ultra wide panel on my desk. In fact, both of Nick and Phil have ultra wide panels on their desk. I've always run ultra wides when I wasn't running the 65-inch BFGD panel because of the reasons I just explained. But I fell in love with the mini LED backlighting and the contrast and the saturation. And so I've been running a standard 16:9, 32-inch Elite VIEWSONIC panel on my desk. And now we've got this guy right here. So in terms of functionality, it's a 200 hertz HDMI 2.1 mini LED curved VESA display HDR 1400 with AMD FreeSync Premium Pro, plus a 1 millisecond gray to gray response time. So now that we've kind of gone over the high level specs, we have our standard, this is a standard cable, not a Mickey Mouse cable. So all Elite panels have a USB hub in the back, USB 3 hub. This one's got the USB-B connector for the USB 3. I hate USB so much. Anyway, it's not, in my opinion, it's not long enough for proper cable management, but because there is a hub on the back of your monitor, it allows you to, an easy place to plug in things like webcams. Now this base I expect to look different than the other bases. The other bases, if we like look at this reference here, the one on my desk, has a solid piece of metal straight across, but because this is an ultra wide, it's gonna probably have to be wider than that. And I can see already that it's got like the stick leg bases. So here is, that's a nice curvature right there. It's actually pleasing to look at. Like this is the little stuff that costs more to make, but it just looks so nice. It has a cable channel built into it. Kind of looks like a weapon. So all of this is toolless to put together, by the way. So there's our base. Our base is now connected. You can see it's gonna stick out kind of far. And the reason for that is obviously front weight. The bigger the panel, so they need to have the legs protrude like this so it doesn't tip forward. So this is gonna impede into your desk space a little bit. If you have a big gaming mat or something like we have on jsusense.com, gaming mats available today. What I like to do is put the mat down, then put the legs on top of it. So keep that in mind. But I like this shape because this allows you, if you want it to be like a corner monitor, check that out. See, this allows you to put them in the corner of a table and you still have the feet. If this were straight like that, you wouldn't be able to put it in the corner of a setup. I know lots of people run corner setups, especially with wide panels, because you have more real estate in the corner than flat. So I just wanted to point out this leg design does allow you to stick it in a corner like this, and you can push it back as far as possible. Because this monitor does have USB-C high data transfer with 90-watt charge capability, 90 watts, comes with a very flexible, actually, USB-C cable. They do actually provide an HDMI 2.1 Ultra cable. They provide you at least with an HDMI cable, which is gonna be capable of carrying the signal that this monitor is looking for. So that's included, which is nice. And then they even include a DisplayPort cable. So look at all of these cables that they provide you with the panel. It's actually fairly weighty. There's been some ultrawides I've picked up and I'm like, what is in here? Air? You know, because they're so light. And you know, I'm old enough to be like, weight equals quality. So, yeah, if you're gonna, I got this, we're fine. If you're gonna run a VESA arm, get one that is at least a gas piston adjustable. Otherwise, there we go. So a lot of VIEWSONIC traits are visible on this panel, as would be expected. First of all, we have our flip out headphone holder right there. So if you have wireless headphones or even wired, you can hang them right there. On connectivity, we have 2 HDMI, USB-C, 1 DisplayPort, 3 USB 3.0 output that come in from the hub, and then you've got your 3.5 millimeter output jack. But in terms of adjustability, you can see we do have swivel, and then we do have pan and tilt, obviously. It's about 5 degrees down, about 15 degrees up. And then we have a pretty significant amount of height adjustability here. This does not rotate. So you cannot rotate this into like a portrait. Typically this shape right here on the Elite panels is what glows for RGB. It'll be blue light by default unless you enable the rainbow mode. This one's actually on RGB by default, but you can see we have ARGB strips sitting in here. You can control this lighting actually through the panel itself. I just want to point that out. However, they've now made it whiter along the back, and this is gonna allow a little bit of bounce lighting against your wall or whatever. So a little bit of indirect lighting, which is kind of neat. All of that stuff is nice and neat to talk about. We need to fire it up now and see how it actually performs. Okay, so 165 technically, by the way, is the out-of-the-box refresh rate. The 200 hertz is an overclock, and it's a joystick D-pad on the right side, which when you push in turns it off, by the way. I'm so used to pushing them in to get to like the menu. All the different kind of preset color modes, game modes, etc. Oh, we can turn on and off HDR from here as well. Here's our local dimming. So you have your different levels of local dimming. You see 165 is the most that we can see here, not 200. Typically to find the 200, you would have to find the overclock setting and enable that. But I want to see if we can enable the 200, and I think what's gonna happen here is because we have a 2.1 monitor with a 2.1 cable on a 2.0 device, we may not see the 600 unless I put the DisplayPort on there. So response time, this is the overdrive. We'll show this in a second here. This is where you can basically make, oh, there's an explanation. You guys can read that yourself. But basically this is how we can overdrive the response time on the refresh rate, or the response time. Both HDMIs are 2.1 though. I want to point that out. So there's our volume adjuster. Like I said, we do have speakers built into this. There we go. They're not great. They're only good enough for either the pass-through to that headphone jack or to know sound is working, but I would absolutely, that's maxed out and it's crackly. So built-in speakers, given how thick this panel is, I'm kind of surprised they're not better because, I mean, you could fit better speakers in here than you find in flat panel TVs these days. So I'm gonna shut this down now And we're gonna now use the display port and see if we can get that 200 hertz to show up. In fact, it knows when you're on a device that's not 2.1, so it even tells you when you first boot up the monitor, like, hey, do you want to switch it from 2.1 to 2.0? And until you do that, you don't get an image. But the monitor is smart enough to tell you, like, hey, this is not a 2.1 device. Should we switch to backwards compatibility? And the answer is yes. So let's see now what DisplayPort does. So overclocking was grayed out on the HDMI. On DisplayPort is now enabled. We can turn this on. It will reboot the panel. Now we will see 200 hertz available. It's kind of ironic to me that they call it overclocking. And here's the other thing too. You lose local dimming control and pure XP control and FreeSync Premium Pro by turning it on. So these are functions that I don't personally feel are worth the trade-off for an extra 35 FPS, but that's up to you to decide for yourself. And there it is. So, and you can't tell a difference. You honestly can't. All right, so we're gonna go to UFO test. This is a place where you can go to check the frame rate and refresh rate of your panel. And it will give you some pretty nice demos here to look at. Now here's the thing. I see a fair amount of ghosting even at 200. It's pretty blurry. Response time is set to standard. So I'm gonna go to fastest first and see what happens. Okay, that sharpened it up quite a bit actually. Now here's the thing, typically you go to the fastest response time and what you'll start to get is you'll get some pre-ghosting where typically you'll see trails behind the item moving. You'll see it in front of the item moving. It actually sharpened that up quite a bit. Look at the stars. Fastest almost looks a little over sharpened. The motion inside of the UFO looked pretty crisp, but the problem is once you got into an actual environment like this, it looked really over sharpened. And that was one of the things I talk about can happen with overdriving stuff. So as you start to go sideways here, I want you to really focus right here on the cross pattern in the window. When I go strafe left and right, you're gonna see it skip. You see it almost disappears. Look at this door right here. It almost looks like it moves left and right inside that door frame. And you can see the brightness of it changes quite a bit. And a lot of that has to do absolutely with the overdrive. I go to fastest. Oh, there's your example of why you don't just go and put everything as high as it can go. Look at when I move this, look at it looks, oh, look at that noise. Look at that, it introduces so much noise in there. These are some of the features that are really cool to mess around with, but you start realizing like they can have some really negative effects if you go too far with it. So there you go, the first ultra-wide panel I've taken a look at, and I believe it's the first Elite ultra-wide panel. In fact, this just sort of showed up one day. They were like, hey, we got a new panel coming. Like even my rep was like, I didn't know this was coming. Do you want one? I'm like, sure. Then it was an ultra-wide. And I was like, holy cow, I didn't even, maybe it mentioned it in the email. I didn't notice it showed up. I was excited. A ton of features in here, 200 FPS. Personally, I would not overclock. I would just leave it at 165, maybe even 144, to be honest. 1500R curve. At the proper sitting distance from the panel, it doesn't have this weird effect. It's not creating this bowl of sound reflection. If you live stream and you talk into a really curved panel, it gets very distracting because you hear the sound bouncing back at you at weird angles. But it's FreeSync Premium, 2 HDMI 2.1 inputs, which means it's forward compatible with the new Radeon graphics cards that are coming out that are HDMI 2.1. USB-C, charges through USB-C, up to 90 watts of charge, which is sick. If you're not using that USB-C cable to do anything for the panel, it also works as a standby charger, and it just doesn't scream gamer boy. It's just like, hey, it's a clean aesthetic, then you owe it to check it out, because here's the thing. It's not cheap, but it's also not as expensive as you might expect it to be. So what I'll do is I'll put a link down below, because pricing's always changing, especially right now during the holidays. Pricing's probably gonna go up and down because of sales, so I don't wanna call out the price in this video. You'll have to click the link and go and see. No, it's not a sponsored link or anything like that. I think it's even gonna go to like B&H Photo or something like that, which we don't even work with. So just to see what the realistic pricing of this panel is. Anyway, I'm curious if anyone has already gotten this panel. Because if you compare the price of this mini LED panel to the price of the 32-inch mini LED that I have on my desk, this is cheaper. And cheaper by enough to buy like an RTX 4080. All right guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for VIEWSONIC for sending us this panel to take a look at. I'm curious, do you guys care about all this sort of panel tech? I used to not give a crap, honestly. I ran basic 60 hertz flat panels, TN, for the longest time. And then I saw the light, literally.